This happened to me about 8 months ago. I've never told anyone the full story, not really. I mean, I've mentioned the weird notes to a few friends, framed it as some kind of prank, but all the details, the gnawing dread that settled in my gut and never really left. That's for here, I guess. It was a Tuesday, I think, or maybe a Wednesday. The days blurred together then like they still do sometimes. I'd just gotten home from work, the usual grind at the insurance firm downtown. The air was already starting to chill, that subtle shift that signals autumn is coming. I lived in a small, second-story apartment in a quiet suburban neighborhood. I unlocked my door, the familiar click of the deadbolt echoing in the hallway, and tossed my keys on the small table by the entrance. Standard routine. That's when I saw it, tucked neatly under the edge of my doormat just outside my apartment. A plain white napkin folded in half. Unfolding it, I found a single word scrawled in black ink in surprisingly neat cursive handwriting. Asterisk hello. Asterisk. The next day it was another napkin. Same spot, same neat handwriting. This time, asterisk you left for work at 7:42 a.m. Asterisk. My heart did a small, uncomfortable lurch. 7:42 a.m. That was pretty specific. I usually left around 7:40, sometimes 7:45 if I was feeling particularly lazy. I checked my phone. I'd left at precisely 7:42 a.m. This continued for nearly a week. The notes always appeared after I got home from work, always under the doormat. They were always on napkins, always in that same elegant script. Asterisk you had a visitor at 3:15 p.m. today, Sarah from accounting. Asterisk Sarah asterisk had asterisk dropped by surprisingly about a week before. She needed help with a spreadsheet. She'd left around 3:30. How would anyone know that? Asterisk you bought Nescafe Gold Blend coffee. Again. Asterisk I did. It's my go-to, cheap and strong. But how? Did someone see me at the grocery store? Then the napkin stopped. For 3 days, nothing. Just the usual mundane return to my empty apartment. I started to relax, to convince myself it had been a temporary obsession for whoever was doing it. Then came the torn notebook paper. It was tucked under the edge of my door, not the mat this time. Scrawled in the same neat hand, but more hurried now, agitated. The ink bled slightly on the rough paper. Asterisk the red blanket on the back of the sofa. You always use it when it rains. It's frayed on the left corner. And the chipped mug with the faded flower. Favorite, isn't it? Asterisk. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the building, every distant car alarm, sent jolts of adrenaline through me. I kept imagining a face pressed against my window, a dark silhouette against the dim streetlights. Asterisk you're looking tired, my name. Did the late night scrolling catch up to you? Asterisk my name. They knew my name. I decided to install cameras. Not full-blown surveillance, just a couple of small, discreet motion-activated cameras. One pointed at my front door, the other at the hallway leading to my bedroom. Asterisk you forgot to pay your electricity bill. The due date was the 15th. Asterisk I'd completely forgotten. The electricity company had sent a reminder, but it had gotten buried under my work emails. Asterisk the cashier called you honey. You blushed. Asterisk I hadn't noticed. I always tried to be polite, unobtrusive, but apparently I'd reacted. Asterisk the new locks look nice. A bit overkill, don't you think? The one on the bedroom door sticks a little after you've used it. Just a heads up. You'll want to get that checked. Asterisk. One afternoon, I came home to find a small, intricately folded paper crane sitting on my pillow. It was made from a piece of yellow legal paper, the kind I kept in my desk drawer. There was no note, just the crane. Asterisk, I see you. I know you're scared. It's okay. You're not alone anymore. Asterisk, the ink was still wet, still glistening. This happened to me about 6 months ago. I've never told anyone the full story. Not my sister, not my best friend, not even Sarah, and she's usually the one I tell everything to. It's just, when I try to explain it, the words don't quite fit. I lived alone in a small cabin out in the woods then. Not asterisk deep asterisk woods, mind you. It was maybe 20 minutes outside of a decent-sized town. Enough to have neighbors within a reasonable drive, but far enough that you felt truly separate. The cabin itself was charmingly rustic. Think exposed beams, a stone fireplace that actually worked, and a kitchen that was functional if dated. My only real company was a lazy old black cat named Shadow, who mostly slept in sunbeams and occasionally deemed me worthy of a purr. Life settled into a rhythm. Wake up, make coffee, stare out the window at the trees, design logos and websites, walk Shadow around the property, cook dinner, read by the fire. It was peaceful, almost aggressively peaceful. The first sign, the very first subtle shift, was so insignificant I barely registered it. I was out collecting firewood, the late autumn air sharp and smelling of damp earth and decaying leaves. I found a perfectly flat, weathered piece of bark about the size of my palm. Etched into it with something sharp, some kind of pointed stone or awl, was a single, crude drawing. It was an eye, just a rough oval with a pupil. I assumed it was some lost bit of art from a previous owner, or maybe some kids messing around. We got the occasional hiker passing through the access road, though it wasn't a designated trail. I shrugged it off, tossed it onto the pile of kindling by the back door, a weird little trinket. The next morning, I woke up to the usual chorus of birds. The sun was filtering through the pines, casting long shadows across my floor. I made my coffee, the familiar hiss of the percolator a comforting sound. As I walked towards the front door to get the paper, I noticed something on the welcome mat. Another piece of bark. This one was thicker, rougher, and on it was a stick figure. A simple sketch, but undeniably a person. And over its head a stark red X, not painted but etched deeply as if someone had scraped away the bark itself. My stomach did a little flip. This was no random piece of debris. This was deliberate. I picked it up, the rough edges catching on my fingertips. The red X looked almost fresh. I glanced around the clearing up the winding dirt road. Nothing. Just trees and silence. Over the next few days, the feeling of being watched intensified. It wasn't a constant, overwhelming paranoia, but a gnawing certainty that I wasn't alone. I'd be working at my desk, staring at a screen, and I'd get this sudden, visceral urge to look up, to scan the tree line. Then the notes started appearing on the windows. It began with the kitchen window, the one that overlooked the back porch. I was washing dishes, the warm water and soap a mundane anchor when I saw it. Tucked into a crevice of the window frame, held in place by a sliver of dried mud, was another piece of bark. This one was smaller, more like a shard. Etched into it was a symbol that looked like a crooked spiral or maybe a coiled snake. I froze, my hands still in the soapy water. My breath hitched. How had it gotten there? I hadn't opened the window. It was sealed tight. I carefully dried my hands and reached for it, my fingers trembling. The bark was cold, damp. The spiral seemed to writhe under my gaze. The next morning, there was another symbol on the living room window. This was a series of dots, arranged in a rough triangle. It was attached with the same dried mud. No footprints outside the window, no disturbed leaves. It was like they materialized there. I started to feel a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. I switched to locking my doors more habitually, double-checking the deadbolts. I even started drawing the curtains at night, something I'd never done before. The darkness outside, which I'd once found so peaceful, now felt pregnant with unseen things. The symbols kept coming. On the bedroom window, a jagged line that looked like a lightning bolt. On the car windshield, a circle with a dot in the center. Always on a piece of bark, always etched, always with that unsettlingly crude artistry, and always placed so that I would see it. I started driving into town more often, just for the sake of being around people. I'd sit in the local diner, nursing a coffee for hours, just listening to the chatter, the clinking of plates. I even struck up a conversation with Brenda, the waitress who'd known me since I moved in. But the notes kept appearing, and the feeling of being watched was no longer a vague unease, but a suffocating presence. It was like an itch I couldn't scratch, a constant awareness that my senses were being observed. Then came the third piece of bark, the one that truly broke me. I was in my living room enjoying a rare moment of calm. I'd just finished a project and I was scrolling through my phone, listening to a podcast. It was dusk, the light fading fast. I heard a faint scraping sound coming from the direction of the front door. I hesitated, then slowly, carefully reached for the doorknob. My hand shook so violently I almost missed it. I turned it slowly, pulling the door inward just a crack, and there it was. Not on the welcome mat this time. It was propped against the door frame right at eye level, a piece of bark larger than the others. Etched onto it crudely but unmistakably was a face. It was a distorted, elongated face with wide, staring eyes. And then I saw it. The mouth. It was a ragged line stretched far too wide, with tiny, sharp-looking teeth drawn along its length. And just below it, so close I could almost feel the grit, was a single, perfect fingerprint. I slammed the door shut, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My hands were slick with sweat. I fumbled with the deadbolt, throwing it home with a click that sounded deafening. I stumbled back, my eyes darting around the room as if expecting to see that face staring back at me from the shadows. That's when I realized the feeling of being watched. It wasn't just from the woods. It was closer, much closer. Then a new sound. A soft, deliberate tapping. Not on the door, not on the windows, on the wall beside the fireplace. Tap, tap, tap. It was slow, rhythmic, like someone was gently drumming their fingernails. I spun around, my eyes wide. The tapping continued, moving along the wall inch by agonizing inch. It was coming from asterisk inside asterisk the cabin. No, that couldn't be right. The cabin was solid. There were no hidden passages, no crawl spaces I knew of. The tapping stopped. Then a faint scratching from behind the wood-paneled wall. A small section of the wood paneling near the corner where the wall met the ceiling began to bulge outwards, slowly, imperceptibly at first, then with a distinct, sickening creak. Then a tiny crack appeared in the bulging wood, a sliver of darkness no bigger than a pencil lead, and from that crack I heard it, a faint, wet sound like something breathing. A shallow, raspy breath, and a rustling like dry leaves skittering across a surface. I stumbled backward, bumping into the couch. I could feel a cold sweat breaking out all over my body. My vision started to tunnel. The sounds were amplifying, echoing in the small cabin, distorted and terrifying. The crack widened, more darkness, and then I saw it. A single pale, elongated finger. It emerged from the crack slowly, deliberately. It was unnaturally long and thin, the skin stretched taut over bone. It was tipped with a dirty, broken fingernail. It twitched. Then it began to scratch at the wood again, from the inside. I didn't scream. I couldn't. All I could do was stare, paralyzed, as the wood paneling began to splinter and crack, the sounds of scraping and wet breathing growing louder. I could feel the vibrations through the floor. Whatever was on the other side, it was pushing its way through, and it was close. Incredibly, impossibly close. This happened to me 6 months ago. I've never told anyone the full story. Not really. I've hinted at it. People have seen the circles under my eyes, the way I jump at the slightest noise, but the sheer weight of it, the creeping, insidious way it wormed its way into my brain, well, that's something I've struggled to articulate. I live in a decent apartment complex. Not luxury, but clean, well-maintained. The kind of place where you get a text message from the landlord if the hallway lights are out for too long. It's in a quiet suburb, the kind where the biggest event of the year is the high school football game. Downstairs, directly below me, lived Mrs. Gable. I barely knew her. She was a tiny woman, probably in her late 70s, with bird-like eyes and a perpetual frown etched into her face. She always wore muted floral dresses, even in winter, and her silver hair was pulled back into a tight bun. My life at the time was normal. I worked a standard office job, spent my evenings reading, watching shows, occasionally having friends over. I liked my music loud sometimes. Pop anthems and rock ballads that vibrated through the floor, I'm sure. The first note appeared on my doormat one Tuesday morning. It was a small square of pale blue stationery folded into a neat triangle. Inside, written in a spidery, almost illegible hand, were just a few words. "Your music is quite loud this evening. Please consider the time." A few days later, another note. This one was folded differently, a smaller, more compact square. "Are you all right? I heard a thud earlier. Hope everything is well." Then the tone started to shift. It was subtle at first, like a barely perceptible wrong note in a familiar song. One evening, I'd had a friend, Sarah, over. We'd been watching a movie and laughing. Around 11, Sarah left. As I walked her to the door, I saw Mrs. Gable's door across the hall was slightly ajar. I could see a sliver of dim light. The next morning, a note. "He left very late. Be careful who you let into your home." My stomach did a little flip. Asterisk he. Asterisk Sarah was a woman, and who was she to judge when her guests left? It felt intrusive. The notes continued, appearing with unnerving regularity. "I saw you talking to the delivery man. He looked suspicious. His van was parked too long. I'd ordered groceries. The delivery guy was perfectly nice, a young man with a bright smile. You shouldn't be out that late. The streetlights are out on Elm Street. It's dangerous." I'd gone for a brief walk, maybe 10:30 p.m. It was a perfectly safe neighborhood. I knew Elm Street well. The streetlights worked fine. The content of the notes grew more specific, more alarming, yet still couched in a passive-aggressive concern. "That man who comes to your apartment on Thursdays. He has shifty eyes. He carries a large bag. The man who comes on Thursdays was Brian, the IT guy who occasionally came to fix my finicky printer." I started glancing at Mrs. Gable's door more often. Was she watching me? Was she always there? The thought made my skin crawl. I started to feel like I was being observed, my every move scrutinized. One evening, I was on the phone with my mother. We were talking about work, about my plans for the weekend, a perfectly mundane conversation. After I hung up, a note appeared. You were talking on the phone about your plans. You sounded agitated. Is someone threatening you? You can tell me. The notes became less about my music or my guests, and more about what she saw or interpreted me doing. You paced too much last night. You were restless. Are you hiding something? I'd been unable to sleep, and yes, I'd paced. The shadows by your window were moving erratically, like someone was trying to get in. I'd been trying to untangle some fairy lights for my apartment. The shadows were just my own and the fairy lights. But to her, it was an attempted break-in. Then came the note that truly broke something inside me. It was placed directly on my doorstep, not folded, but simply slapped there as if in haste. He's watching you. The one with the dark coat. He's always there. You haven't seen him, but I have. He's coming for you. I started staying home more. I'd work remotely when I could, avoiding any reason to be out, any interaction that might be misinterpreted. The idea of going to the grocery store, of having a delivery, filled me with dread. That night the notes stopped appearing on my doormat. Instead, they started appearing under my door. Small, crumpled pieces of paper shoved through the gap. It felt more aggressive, more immediate. He's inside the building now. I heard him walking. He's quiet. He knows where you are. He's in the hallway. Don't open the door no matter what you hear. I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. The silence was deafening. Was this a game? Was she trying to drive me mad, or was something actually happening? The next morning, I found another note. It was on the same pale blue stationery, but this time it was soaked with something dark and sticky. It smelled faintly of rust and something metallic. He's got the key. He's coming to get you now. You have to run. I heard it then. A faint scraping sound from the lock. It was slow, deliberate, not the fumbling of someone with the wrong key. This was someone with knowledge. Then a click. The lock disengaged. The door swung inward, just a tiny crack, and a sliver of darkness appeared. Then, from Mrs. Gable's apartment, a single strangled cry. It was a sound of pure terror, cut short abruptly. Silence. The next morning, the police were there. Yellow tape adorned Mrs. Gable's door. I watched from my window, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. Did you hear anything last night, sir? Any disturbances? No, I lied. Nothing at all. It was very quiet.